Hello, my name is Dr. Jim Doty, and I'm the host of the Into the Magic Shop podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the brain and the secrets of the heart. Hi, my guest today is Dr. Tony Nader. He is a physician, a neuroscientist who received his PhD at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is the leader of the Transcendental Meditation movement and also the president of Maharishi Open University and Maharishi University of Management. Today we're talking about his new book, Consciousness is All There Is. I hope you enjoy our conversation today. Well, Tony, it's great to have you with me today. And of course, one of the things we're going to be talking about is your new book, which I will show there, which I think comes out, is it August 6th?
Yes, it's August 6th.
Well, congratulations. Believe me, I know how hard it is to write a book, and so I appreciate that. So our conversation today is going to be about consciousness in part, and maybe you can tell us, though, briefly a little bit about your background and how you ended up not only with your interest in consciousness, but a little bit more about your backstory with Maharishi and how that evolved. And of course, I know obviously, I think this happened while you were in med school, your interest grew in this area.
Correct. Thank you for having me first, Jim. It's wonderful. Nice to see you again. Yes, I grew up interested in mind-body problem and thought I'd find all the answers in the human physiology and studying medicine, particularly intrigued about human behavior and why we do what we do, as I faced a civil war, which was quite terrible, and where people coming from backgrounds of supposedly spirituality, etc., they still feel the threat from the other and they fight each other. So I thought everything comes from physical physiology and leads to the emergence of the brain, and that leads to some decision making based on the complexity of what we have and the prejudices, etc. So if we study the brain, we study the body. So I did study physiology. I did medicine at the American University in Beirut. And then at the same time, I had learned transcendental meditation, which is a purely mind technique, consciousness technique, just very simple. You don't do anything physically. You just guide your mind to settle down, or it guides itself. It's a very natural, simple technique. And I was having great experiences with it, particularly during the war, where I had to face very tough situations in the emergency room with great casualties every day and lack of sleep and all of that. And it gave me that such deep strength and understanding of myself and ability to face these situations that I kept doing it even during the hard times of medical school. And then I was lucky to be accepted at MIT. After having done my internship and some psychiatry, I did at MIT Brain and Cognitive Science, where I got my PhD. And at the same time, I was at Mass General Hospital, where I did neurology, so the medical school there of Harvard. And I continued to be inspired by the mind, and I thought I'd take a sabbatical. I was invited by Maharishi to go to India. He knew I was meditating. We had met before, like 10 years before, in Switzerland when there was a health conference. And I did research on some of the natural medical products that come from this Ayurvedic medicine, the ancient medicine. So he wanted me to come and work with him. I had also learned to become a teacher of meditation, of transcendental meditation, and asked me to come and be with him. And I thought, I'd come for a few months. I had a car, a plane, an apartment in Boston. even plane. I loved flying and all that, and all these had to wait. So when I went was like for a week or two, and then it became more and more. And so I had to call my colleagues so they can take care of my patients who were behind. And then a few months later, well, I said, well, it's going on. He encouraged me to stay with him. I was so inspired that I continued with him, actually. I called my uncle who was living in Connecticut, told him to sell the car. Then I sold the plane, and then after a while, sold the apartment. And it became my lifetime with this great teacher, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and diving deep into the knowledge of the mind and consciousness. And that's how the story started and kept going. And when I wrote the book, it was to tell a little bit what I discovered, what I understood about the mind, the body, the relationship, consciousness, and all of that.
And I guess in the interval, you became a Vedic scholar. And obviously, I'm sure that has had an impact on your views about consciousness.
Absolutely. This is how I discovered that actually consciousness plays a more holistic and more complete role in balancing our mind and thinking and even the physiology, because the technique transcendental meditation has been shown to improve health, improve physical activity, physiological activity. So coming from the mind level, from consciousness level, you could have profound influence on the individual physiology, but also on the collective physiology. We have seen that there is change in society, in the surrounding of people who practice these techniques together. Also improvement in behavior, more tolerance, more openness, more friendliness, more compassion, and all of these beautiful values come naturally when people settle in within themselves and remove the deep stresses and strains that block their perception.
Well, maybe we can just sort of take a second to acknowledge that, there are different types of meditation, of course. One that's also very popular in the West is either mindfulness types of practices, or I think we can throw them into the genre of open monitoring types of practices, where you remain in the present moment, but you do not react to all those things that are going on. And those types of practice as well have been demonstrated to have also a lot of health benefits. I think at the end of the day, understanding your mind and understanding the power you have with certain types of training can have a huge, huge impact on how we respond to our world, I think.
Yeah, obviously, actually we almost always evolve no matter what. Every experience we have, every relationship we have, every situation we encounter is a lesson in life, and it opens up our greater understanding of who we are, why we are, even on a subliminal level. It's not always clear, and the past can be sometimes tedious and sometimes difficult, sometimes challenging, but overcoming challenge and expanding our awareness and listening and talking to people who are having wisdom. I know you like a lot, or not just like, but you have investigated compassion and feelings. And these are all guides that help us to expand our being from the smallness to embrace more of others and be feeling with others. So all of these techniques, including mindfulness, are very helpful. Everyone has its different character. Transcendental meditation is, by its name, to transcend, which means to go beyond even any open monitoring and allow the mind to settle down to its own inner self. It's like having the ocean, and you can be on the surface of the ocean observing the waves, and you can be taken by the waves, you can be part of the storm and fight it, and you can learn with mindfulness to settle down and see it and observe the waves and whatever, and not be shaken by it. And you can also dive deeper. That's why we call transcending, go beyond the surface level. And that happens very naturally by the natural tendency of the mind to search always for more happiness, more charm, more fulfillment. And since the bottom of the ocean, which is our true inner self, is more than the most, when you take this inward direction, the mind dives naturally there. And there you transcend, which means you go beyond any observation, any even putting attention on anything or even observing. And you transcend, which means you experience what we call pure consciousness, which is a state where there is no thought, there is no any kind of mental activity, not even memory, and it happens naturally. It's not something you force yourself to do. And you experience that inner silence, which we call pure being, pure consciousness.
Well, so I guess one of the questions about that, though, is this a individual experience, or by doing so, does this connect you, if you will, to the reality of the oneness of all of us and how this allows us to connect with that, if you will?
Beautifully said. It's really the theme of the book. Consciousness is all there is, which means that's who we really are, actually. We all are expressions of one ocean. So we all are actually that ocean, and that ocean expresses itself in infinite number of ways, which include not us only as humans, but animals, trees, and all that there is. And when we dive within us, what we have as individual human beings, we have the ability to experience deeper levels of consciousness. So consciousness is experienced on different levels, and it is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. But what happens is you need a system that allows you to experience deeper levels, or if it's limited, then you experience only surface levels of the ocean of consciousness. So exactly as you say, when you dive deep within, you actually experience the oneness that is there. You experience the depths of the ocean, which is the source of all the other expressions.
Well, maybe before we make that deeper dive, maybe you can define consciousness in your terms. As you well know, there are many, many theories of consciousness. And to talk cogently, we generally have to agree on one definition. And maybe you could give our listeners your definition of consciousness.
This is very fundamental because you see in the literature a lot of discussions about consciousness with everyone coming with their own idea. Most of the ideas that are usually given is about human-like consciousness, which means the way we as humans experience the self, experience the universe, experience each other, experience love and fear and pain, but also joy and happiness and knowledge and memories and all of that. That's a very rich bouquet of aspects of consciousness. And truly, it's an anthropomorphic, which means human-based consciousness definition, because obviously what can we do other than say what we know and what we experience? The problem with this is we deny, in a sense, consciousness to entities that don't have the same characteristics of consciousness as we are and as we are having, and therefore then we cannot see how a cat can be conscious like us. It doesn't seem to be. And indeed, it is not. We don't see the tree is conscious like us. Absolutely not. It doesn't have probably the sense of, fear of the environment. Maybe at some level it does. I don't know. I'm not a tree. So we don't know exactly what kind of consciousness it is. So basically, to go back to the question and having set up this kind of platform, my definition of consciousness is anything that senses, any sensing, any detecting, any reacting, any experiencing, any memory, any sense of response to something is part of consciousness. So consciousness is all permeating, it is everything. So I go as far as saying when a stone experiences gravity, now the stone falls because it goes through gravity, the sense of gravity. If you feel that it's okay, it's the space-time continuum geometry and all that, like Einstein theories, you might say, well, it's different, but it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it experiences a slope or experiences a pull or something like that, and it falls and it takes the course, a specific trajectory, that is an expression of consciousness. Now, people will jump, oh, what do you mean? The stone knows that it makes a decision that it is there? No, it is not. This is why I started by saying consciousness is on a spectrum, a big, huge spectrum. Starting from sensing anything is a very minimal, meager level of consciousness, where the stone has absolutely no idea of the self. So self-consciousness is a higher level of consciousness. The stone has no sense of self, sense of future, sense of past, sense of pain, sense of what will happen to me. The stone has none of that, absolutely none of that. So I'm not talking about human-like consciousness in a stone. All I'm saying is there is a sensing which gets the stone to actually fall. Or if you take two particles, one positive, one negative particle, and that is no more the gravitational field, but we're talking here about the electromagnetic field. There is a field. A field is like the ocean. That field can have fluctuations, and these are appearing sometimes as a negative and sometimes as a positive. So an electron is a negative kind of fluctuation, a positron is a positive kind of fluctuation. Now, when these two actually attract each other, positive with negative, and come towards each other, that is sensing. But on the most minimal, meager level of sensing, and that is also an expression of the lower level of consciousness, going up to maybe, all the range we can describe, maybe when a sunflower turns to the sun in the morning, that is sensing the sun. It's more complex than two particles interacting. It has more mechanisms within it that make it turn. Does it have a decision-making process? Does it have a choice to say, no, I don't want to turn to the sun? Not, it is not there. So there is still sensing, and there is still a complex reaction which makes the sunflower turn to the sun, and that is another, a little more complex level of consciousness. And like that, if you take an animal, you can have an animal that has very complex reactions but doesn't recognize the self. You can have more advanced animals that actually have self-recognition. They know that they are there. If you put something on the forehead of a more advanced animal and make them look at the mirror, they recognize that this is themselves and they rub it, but other animals don't do that. So there are tests to see if the animals have self-recognition. So there is a spectrum until you reach the human, where you have quite an advanced consciousness as we know it.
Well, I think one part you were just mentioning is theory of mind, which is another level of consciousness. But some individuals put these things into categories of either oscillation or vibration. And this allows you to indicate that a stone, because it has a vibration or oscillation of its atoms, that it therefore has consciousness, while there are others who probably more anthropomorphize consciousness in the context of the interpretation of qualia and saying, I'm a being, I'm interpreting this, and therefore that makes me, I don't know, at a higher level of consciousness, or may just say, I am conscious. And it's always sort of fascinating because it seems as though there are ever increasing numbers of theories of consciousness. And maybe you could also briefly talk about what David Chalmers calls or states as the hard problem of consciousness, to give some of our listeners some of this, I don't know, I'm not sure if it's controversy or insights into some of the subtleties of these discussions.
Yeah, the idea from David Chalmers, which became very famous, is that you have these processes that explain each other. You come from physics explaining chemistry, chemistry explaining biology, from the chemical to the cells, and then the cells biology more explaining physiology. And it's all mechanical and well explained, and there is a sequence, and you can tell what is happening. And suddenly you get to a human being, and they have this very subjective personal experience, which you mentioned, the qualia, a very, very, very personal subjective experience. It's like love or feeling or even just redness of the red, and you experience it personally. And that is not explained by the mechanical processes from physics to chemistry to biology to physiology to kind of a complex human nervous system. It's so mechanical, those values, and yet this very personal subjective experience is very hard to explain. So he said there are two aspects of the problem of consciousness. The easy aspect, which is that we will ultimately understand how this chain of reaction lead to our ability to perceive and to recognize red. But that is the easy problem, although it's very difficult still, and we are still working on it. And then there is the hard problem, which is how this translates into this very personal, very intimate sense of being, sense of existing, sense of history, sense of self-referral and personal qualia, which means moments of inner experience that are not mechanical. And he said this is the hard problem of consciousness, because we can't explain it. How does it emerge? And so scientists and philosophers have been trying to explain this and that perspective. And so far, when you look at all the history of all suppositions, all studies, all looking into quantum mechanics, trying to kind of squeeze it, you have all these philosophies where it goes to the point where they are so unable to explain that they say it's not even existing. So there are those who say consciousness is an illusion, it's not a problem, it's not a real problem, let's ignore it. And there are those who say, well, there are some microtubules and they can have some mechanical or quantum mechanical aspects to them.
This is Penrose and Hammerot, right?
Yes, exactly. But it's still, you don't still have how this mechanical, electrical, electromagnetic, even at the quantum mechanical level, actually leads to the emergence of this consciousness or awareness. So all of this is within the physicalist perspective. Physicalist perspectives mean you start with an assumption which is never proven, which is no way to prove it actually, except through the senses. That is not even a proof, it's just an illusion, because the senses give us very limited ability to see things from only very limited, you can only see from red to violet, you don't see infrared, you don't see ultraviolet, as a small example. But beyond that, our senses are very limited. You don't see space-time, transformation in terms of speed, many things you don't see. And when you go to quantum mechanics, which is the ultimate aspect of physics, you see weirdness, objects being at two places at the same time, objects being entangled, and all of that, and crossing barriers of energy and all this. I guess we don't need to go into that. The question is, all I'm saying here is there is no evidence that the ultimate reality is actually physical and material. So those who have the hard problem of consciousness are assuming that you are starting from a physical energy that gets complexified, collapses into atoms and then molecules and then cells and like that, and then try to explain just this consciousness which emerges in a bizarre way we don't know how. So that is why you have a hard problem of consciousness. What I like to define, actually, if there is a problem, it's a hard problem of explaining physicality.
Exactly. Yes.
And that would be if you reverse the initial starting point from being physical to being actually consciousness, non-physical. That's what the book Consciousness is All There Is about. It's about showing that what happens if you say, well, let's get a starting point, which we don't know what the starting point is. We are just assuming. There is no proof by any means, definite proof by any means, that physicality is the essence, is the origin, is the primary value. To the contrary, there are, in my point of view, many evidence to show the contrary. But still, if you start from that, can you explain how the physical material level emerges? That is something that the idealists, or those who believe, and I'm not the one who started saying that consciousness is primary. But the problem is, they had a problem of explaining physicality and they didn't do it. So having gone through a lot of research myself in consciousness and Vedic literature and learning from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi and putting all of this together, I came with a suggestion, let's call it, of how this can be. How is it possible that what we perceive as physical actually comes from pure consciousness, from the ocean of consciousness?
Now, would you say then this heads into either the metaphysical or the spiritual space when you head off in that direction?
It does, of course, heads more into the philosophy, the metaphysics, if you like, of it. But the evidence that I give in the book, hopefully, because I have to build the logic to be convincing, comes from experimental. So there is empirical value. For example, we just talk about the effect of meditating. I mean, you can always find other explanations, but still, there is an effect. You don't do anything physical, you do something mental, and that changes your physiology. A group of people do something mental, and it changes the behavior in society. That is one aspect. Alone maybe is not enough, and it is not enough. Then you take other evidence from, okay, what is physical? What is physics? What is the physical world? Let's try to find out. And that's what science has been trying to find out for 200 or 300 years. And kept dissecting and dissecting and dissecting the physical, and then came to fields which are non-physical. So we used to call it material. Now they say physical because material is localized in time and space. Physical is more like energy. So, okay, there is energy. There are fields. These fields are not limited in space and time. And you get to what? To the quantum mechanical. And beyond the quantum mechanical, you go to the quantum fields. Quantum fields are not limited in time and space. They have weirdness that the classical world cannot explain. How can you explain that if you speed up, the distances crunch and time slows down? So even those values, which are such a deep reference in terms of our existence, time and space, they're just so solid. They are who we are from this limited perspective. And they are found to be relative, to be limited by or changing based on speed. And besides, this is only one example. You know, an electron has a potential to be everywhere at different probabilities. Right. It's not a billiard ball going around an atom, around the center of an atom or the nucleus. And so all of these things and many other things show that these fields are more and more subtle. And now there is theories of unified field, which is actually a mathematical theory. It's not really physical. And you see that the top scientists in the field of physics, I'm not talking about philosophers or metaphysics, that are saying, and I quote some of them in the book, that the world is more like a thought than a reality of physical things. It's more happening in our mind and our thoughts. Although it is real, and that is another part of the importance of acknowledging the reality of the surface value, but it is real as an expression of consciousness. So these are some elements. The other elements is, and that is powerful, that is the explanatory power of a theory or of a paradigm or of a suggestion, as I would like to say, about the reality. And that is its explanatory power. How much can it explain our life? How much can it explain good and bad? How much can it explain purpose? Does it give us a hint about freedom and determinism? Does it show why we grow happier? Or is there a connection between all these values? And this is where I show that actually the explanatory power of the theory, the axiom, or if you like, the paradigm of consciousness being primary, and how it develops into the appearance and dynamics of material and physical existence is really very compelling. And so here you get a converging evidence from a number of sides that are very different that gives the confidence and the strength of the argument.
So I have a couple questions there. On the one hand, because there is a tendency to think humans are the highest level of consciousness that we are aware of, which is somewhat egotistical, and I think a lot of people would acknowledge with the size of the universe that there are potentially other, we may call them conscious organisms that think far beyond us. So is it possible that at our level of development, that we do not have the capacity to understand consciousness, and we, of course, come up with these different theories based on what might be considered the limited knowledge we have? Or there are other suggestions that what we call reality is a delusion, and that, in fact, we're in a simulation. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I more lean towards the fact that we have the capacity to understand, and it's a question of leaving behind our prejudice. When Galileo, and it's a common example, but it's so illustrative, said, or Copernicus, that the sun is not moving in the sky. It's the earth that is round and rotating, and that's why we have the illusion of the sun moving in the sky. They put him in prison or at home,
right?
And because he was crazy. The sun is moving. Can't you see it? Can't you trust what you see and what we all have believed so staunchly as a group for whatever reason all this time? You are disturbing the people's mind by this crazy idea. You can't understand that. It's a mystery of the universe and all of that. Although it explained the movement of the planets, which kind of seem to move back and forth, which is ridiculous in a sense, because if the Earth was sitting there, how would the planet move back and forth? And they move back and forth, of course, because all of us are rotating around the sun. That's also a different astrological kind of consideration. But the main thing is, he said that, and believe it or not, 300 years have to go before it was accepted, actually. Even the guy said it, and he was punished for it. before the common understanding came to the point of saying, well, yeah, after all, we have more technology, we have more knowledge, we have more understanding, and we are more open, and we leave our prejudice behind, and we accept that the earth is round and the sun is rotating around it. It's not the sun the earth is round, the sun is appearing to rotate around the earth, but it's the earth that is rotating around its axis and rotating around the sun. So that is, the state of dogma and pre-beliefs. Now, humans are evolving, research is evolving, understanding is evolving. We had an Einstein who said that time and space are relative, and it was bizarre, but it was demonstrated. We know, that satellites have to have their times adjusted because they have different gravities and different movements, and therefore time for them is different than time for us. And if you don't adjust them, you can't get your GPS to guide you to the right place and the right time. So we come to accept that what is so hardly difficult to imagine, that actually time and space are relative, are actually real. And quantum mechanics also is giving us all these possibilities. So human capacity is huge, and I believe in it. And I believe that what is presented in consciousness is all there is solid in a sense, and it removes the mystery and the difficulty to understand consciousness. So we're not stuck. It's just what we're stuck with is that everything is physical, and therefore consciousness is going to be impossible to explain because either it doesn't exist or we are never going to be able, we are not so intelligent to understand it, so let's leave it and stop, doing that. Why? Just because we are so staunchly believing that everything is actually physical. Now, if you say everything is consciousness, well, nobody had really taken us through the steps by which this universe appears as it appears. So the idea that there are multiverses or the idea that we are a simulation is an escape a little bit. I mean, it is possible that there are multiverses, and my theory allows that to be part of the logic. Why not? And actually, it explains it. That's one of the explanatory powers. Because one of the problems of the multiverse, I know I'm going on a tangent, but I'll come back, is that where is all this energy is coming from to create all these multiverses? They have no idea. How could it be imaginable? Anyway, with consciousness, you can explain it. You don't have to create energy. It's all a fluctuation within that field of being, the fluctuation within that field of consciousness. And if you say simulation, who's doing the simulation? Where is that computer? It's transposing the problem, really.
Well, I guess, though, if you define consciousness, where did consciousness come from? But another question, though, I think is at least interesting to me, is you and I are having this conversation. There is a you, there is a me. But as we, if you will, connect with ultimate consciousness, is there a me or a you at this point? And in that context, how does this sense of ourselves actually interact with this universal consciousness, or do we sort of devolve into this feeling and connection with everything, and there is no more you or me? We're just part of this energy field, if you will, that defines consciousness.
Yeah, the second option. I checked the second option.
Well, how does this...
Which is there is an ocean of consciousness, and we are that on the surface level. We are seeing it from our limited perspective. When we let go of the limited perspective, it's the ocean itself seeing itself. Is no more you seeing it. You cannot you see it. It's too big. It's too huge in your limited perspective. You have to let go of the small self and then reach that state of no sense of individuality. That's why, the Buddhist monks talk about no sense of self, and there is no self. There is no individuality. There is that feeling, which is an experience of being devoid of any individuality. And therefore, in that state, you don't say you and me, you'd say that, I am that. And that is acknowledging itself by itself. It doesn't need your small consciousness. Actually, you're not yours, Dr. Doty, yours is you.
I understand what you're saying.
But the other's conscious, it doesn't need the specific consciousness. Actually, what lights up our consciousness is that ocean of being, that ocean of consciousness is like the light that allows us to see and see from a limited perspective. It's like there is a light, and then you put something to hide other things, and you start seeing from this narrow place, but it's the light that is lighting. It's the light that is lighting. And the other guy there, it's the same light, but they're seeing from their own little space. They're seeing from their own little space. And they say, I am seeing this, and the other side says, I am seeing this, and I am seeing that. And when they both realize, where is the light coming from? They find the light. And it's the same light. And so,
well,
you said something I want to come back to, but if you have a comment.
No, go ahead.
You said something in passing, but it's a big question. Where does consciousness came from? Okay? So if you suppose, okay, all right, you're saying where is the physicality coming from? Where is consciousness coming from? It doesn't have to come from anywhere. Why? Because it's not physical, it's not material, it is not time and space based. The question of where from and where to are space-time contingencies, are space-time necessities. This consciousness is not within space and time. And this is the only way to resolve beginning and ends. And that is why this non-material, so it doesn't comply, is not subject to what we experience as material and physical. Already material and physical is dissolving even in front of our eyes when you come to the quantum field theories and the quantum mechanics, where things are just spread out, there are potentialities, and then why do they collapse at points? Okay, there are different theories. Again, we don't want to go into that, the Copenhagen interpretation of the collapse of the wave function or the multiverse, whatever. There are theories like that. But what happens is that you transcend, you go beyond the atom or the electron, for example, the particle, as being something localized in time and space. It's not there. It could be on the moon. It could be in Mars.
So let me ask a couple other, I think, related questions. So we each have our own individual identity, and theoretically, we are all part of consciousness, or I think you could even put in the context of universal love or connection or oneness. And of course, as humans at least, we have different aspects such as ego, that interfere with us, if you will, being a vessel of love for all. And so a couple other, I think, intriguing aspects of this. So when you die, what does that mean? Does that mean that what we define as our consciousness, or what we perceived ourselves while living in this body, does that dissolve into, I won't say nothingness, but this universal consciousness, and then let's say you're reborn again as an empty vessel? How does the humanness then get defined from this infinite consciousness, or is that a physical property of living in this world, and it is created, if you will, from different pieces that then form this self entity? And what does that mean ultimately at the end of the day? And also, is there such a thing as karma?
This is, of course, a very profound and important question. And the way the paradigm that I describe resolves it or looks at it is that I'll start with consciousness as an ocean of being that is always equal to itself. And we're saying it is really nothingness in terms of physicality, although it is absolutely everything in terms of consciousness as a starting point. But this ocean of consciousness is looking at itself because it is conscious. That's why we're calling it consciousness. And examining itself spontaneously, not like sitting and trying to analyze, spontaneously looks at itself from an infinite number of ways. Now, these infinite number of ways of looking at itself include literally all possibilities, which means everything and its contrary. When you add this up together, since everything has its contrary within it, that ocean remains flat because everything cancels everything. And since it is beyond space and time, everything is here and now. And so, in fact, there is remaining overall, there is remaining nothingness, which means flatness of that consciousness. Okay? So that is the starting point. Now, how can something come out of nothing? That's a big question that will help us to answer, the questions of karma, and the question of continuity and rebirth and what happens and identity and all of that. How something can come out of nothing? It's that when something is created as, let's say, a disturbance, because if it's a flat line, to figure it out, let's imagine a flat line. Flat line, just imagining, that is nothing. No waves, no wiggles, no nothing in it. Now you create a wave going up, so you have disturbed that flatness. But if you create a wave going down at the same time, then it adds up to flatness. If the wave has the same amplitude, the same time, and all of that. So that is how, even within nothing, you can have something. So what is needed to separate or to appear as individual is the separation in time and space of the wave going up with the wave going down. Okay? The overall will remain nothing if you look at it from beyond time and space, which means if everything is here and now, everything remains always nothing. But if you start separating them and start looking at them in space and time, which means this wiggle goes this way, and then other wiggle comes that way later, then you can see two different things. Whereas, again, I'm repeating, the overall is still equal to itself, which is a very natural thing, that is the most logical thing you can say, that something remains what it is, and it always remains what it is. Otherwise, how you can create something out of nothing? Okay, this might require that one thinks about it a little bit, but I hope I made it as a platform of explanation sufficiently clear. I detail it in the book a little more.
Sure. No.
Now, this leads us to then space and time emerging. Why they emerge, how they emerge, it's also a discussion that we can have. But let me go straight to the answer. So what happens is, every time you create something, you have to create the opposite, because otherwise you're creating something out of nothing, which is not accepted. You are changing the initial conditions, and therefore you're doing magic. And life is not magic. It's magical, but it's not magic. It's all beautiful and fantastic, but it obeys laws and it's perfectly organized, and that's perfect, that's wonderful, so it abides by the laws. So what this explains is action and reaction, which is, why should it be? Why should every action has an opposite and equal reaction? Why? There is no explanation. The why in science is just, you say you can't explain. Why? You explain the phenomena. But now we're explaining why every action has a reaction. So when every action has a reaction, it's not only on the physical level, it's on all levels. Whatever you do, whatever you think, you have to have the balancing effect. Otherwise, you're disturbing the line. The line is no more flat line. It's becoming weird. But it cannot become weird. It has to remain overall the same. And so this is the basis of karma. Everything you do is computed, and everything you do has its opposite action and reaction. So yes, karma is a necessity. It's a spontaneous outcome of the very most simplest basic paradigm of reality in its essence. You can't do anything else. So when you come to this life and you create all kinds of wiggles and dances and changes and all of that, you have accumulated a set of things which in time and space have not been fully resolved yet. So you can't just say, exit, I go out and it's finished. When you exit, you're going to come back and take care of those wiggles. So what represents you in the ether, let's call it, also there is no ether, but just to say, when your body drops, is what you have done, your actions, your contributions, what you have learned, what you have, etc., are a set of complex, because we are at a human level, it's very complex, actions and reactions and karmas that have been accumulated that require balancing based on the basic initial principle that we said, the line has to stay aligned. You create a wave this way, you have to create a wave that way. And you've created lots of waves. And now you have to come back. And when you come back, you actually continue your path towards the meaning of why we are here, which is another very big topic.
Well, this is probably the nature of enlightenment. But
Right.
but that being said, then, at least as I understand it, potentially you could come back as a dog or a cow or I suppose even a rock. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? And how?
I don't believe that. It doesn't
Okay.
fit in the paradigm. You've been too complex and too involved to be able to resolve your problems as a stone or as a dog. You really need to come back with higher intelligence, with whatever you've learned to continue your path. Sometimes when this question comes, I take the analogy or example. Somebody's creating a video game. Okay, they create a video game. Let's call it a shooting game, You go in and then you shoot the others and they shoot you. And you start the game, it's bien, you open the box, you get it there, set up, it's great. You play the game and you don't know how it works, it's complex. And by the time you step out, somebody shoots you, you're done. It's okay, you learn that somebody's gonna come, maybe from this side, maybe the next time from that side. You start the game again, and then you've learned something. And now you do something more, and you advance, and you get shot, and you advance again. You start it over, and you continue until you learn, and you adjust, and all of that. And then you kind of reach the goal, okay? If somebody created a game like that, and then just the first time you get shot, you can't play the game anymore. It's over. Who will buy the game? Nobody will buy the game. It doesn't mean anything to have a game like that. So if there is a force of life that created that game of life, if you like, it has to give us the chance to try again. But every time you come to try again, you come with a certain baggage of knowledge, of experience, of all of that. Some things you have created, something you have to create, and you continue your path towards, as you said, enlightenment or full recognition of the reality of life.
So does Vedic literature then basically say that you only come back as a human in a karmic life?
You come back based on your karma, of course, and the best way to learn. That's why we all come in different situations, in different circumstances, which is also something that is left to mystery. Why the Creator will make you come as a miserable person and the other guy something else, and why when you go through your life, why would it be like that?
Well,
and
yeah, what I was going to say, though, is, that's why there are some individuals who, whether you call it God, the Creator, the universe, whatever it is, get frustrated because they say, if God is all-knowing and omniscient and good, why does he allow suffering and for the innocent? And that gets into a whole nother debate because, there are some people who have been profoundly, if you want to say, religious or thoughtful in this regard, who say, I'm now a complete non-believer in anything.
Well, that's where we say, well, you don't have to believe on something unfair. You have to take responsibility. That's the best way on a pragmatic level even, not just on a theoretical level, but on a pragmatic level, but also certainly based on the paradigm I am offering or presenting. You just say that for some reason, these are the best conditions you can have based on your previous life, previous actions, previous, baggage that you have accumulated. And it's now the time to actually use those circumstances. So it's not that you are born somewhere which is not ideal. It's not always bad compared to somebody else who's born in a very comfortable ideal. We've seen and we know children of, wealthy, healthy people who go very much off and live a miserable life. So life is lived on a subjective level. It's not lived on the outer level. That is where consciousness is very important to realize, and it's very important and very essential and important in support of the idea. We don't live our life based on how much cars we have and planes we have. They might help, whatever. I'm not against it. It's great to have wealth and health, and absolutely great and necessary. But what you live, you yourself, what you live, is in your consciousness, is in your awareness, how you digest these things. You can see, I go somewhere, even traveling, even in India, and other places, not that we want to take India as an example, but you go in these villages and these kids who are poor and you talk to them, they have the laughter, they have the happiness, they have the something beautiful about them. I'm not saying everyone, and I'm not saying you need to be poor in order to do that. To the contrary, all I'm saying is that life is lived in your consciousness. And so how you realize things, of course, there are things that happen that are unfathomable on the surface level because we don't know exactly all the circumstances of the past and the present and the needs of the environment. We cannot know. It's unfathomable. That's why we call it unfathomable. And it is said in the Vedic literature, unfathomable is the field of karma, because you can't always explain. But what is fathomable is you do your best and use the circumstances that you have, whatever they are. They might be there and seem to be the worst thing, and you can overcome them. I have had moments in my life where I felt, why, my God, my father got shot in the face in the war. I've seen my friends die. I have been up in the emergency room seeing things I can't even describe to you. When I think about them, I remember the doctors, my friends, would turn their head. They couldn't see what they are receiving with people who have received shrapnels and bullets and things. I don't want to go there because it's not pleasant. But I use that based on my inner consciousness, going back into the self. I didn't use it. I hope I didn't need it. I wish I didn't need it. But it happened to me that it made me ask the big question and maybe go through a lot of questioning and trying and researching and going forward and come to a level which is enlightening for me. And therefore, don't think that the specifics of life on the surface level are always like a punishment or, something then we stop believing in anything. Just take it as that's where you are, and the whole universe is there around you to give you the chance, based on who you are, whatever reason you are there, to make the best out of life.
So let me ask another. There are a few more questions I want to ask, although our time is running out. But one is, so as I mentioned earlier, we have this fathomless universe, I think, and surely most people would acknowledge that there are living beings, or maybe even sentient beings, that probably, in all likelihood, are much more intelligent than us. How does that fit into this view? Is it acknowledged, or is it sort of the highest level is humans, and that's where we start with? Or can these, if you want to call them aliens, do they have the opportunity to have a karmic experience, or are they on the same path to enlightenment?
Of course, it's a conjecture, it's not, you want to know how my paradigm embodies that or embraces that. It's not that my answer is, this is definite, because then it becomes a dogma almost.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is there is a range of consciousness. We have a certain level. It would be presumptuous, actually, for us to assume this is the absolute highest level. Even ourselves as humans, we live through different states of consciousness. We live through sleeping, where we are less conscious, but body is conscious to some level, of course. If noise comes, you wake up. That means there is reception there. That's why we call sleep a state of consciousness, not a state of non-consciousness. But it's a different quality of consciousness. In dream, we have a different style of fictitious reality, and in waking, even in waking, we have different gradations of drowsiness, wakefulness, clarity, broad perspective. When we have slept well in the night, or when we have transcended well during meditation, or whatever other things we have done, eaten the proper food, feeling good, we have clarity. We solve problems. And among ourselves, between ourselves, we know that some of us are, great musicians or great capable of things, and others are physicists, and others are chemists, and others are great athletes, and all of that. And so there are all these potentialities. And then you can imagine that these potentialities can be evolved, can be greater. And so therefore, in the spectrum of possibilities, we can go from the meager level of consciousness to the highest possible level of consciousness, where we can postulate the highest possible level of consciousness. What would be the highest possible level of consciousness? I'm not going to go through what is in between, but because there might be and will be and are things that are in between on different levels, but the highest possible level of consciousness is to imagine a consciousness that knows everything all the time, here and now, of all that there is. It's mind-boggling, but that is where we call it the highest consciousness. Some people give it a name of some quality, and some people give it another name, or we can say just the supreme consciousness.
Well, this is the omniscient consciousness that
Right.
is all-knowing, all-seeing, understands the past, the future, and is at a level beyond certainly me. Let me ask.
And also, I can tell you.
Yeah. Let me ask another question. So you mentioned sleeping as a state of it is not a non-conscious state. But let me ask you about anesthesia, where essentially, if you will, that destroys, I'm not sure destroy is the right word, but it results in us being non-conscious. And then how also does this relate to our definition of self in the context of, let's say, someone who, again, is like us, communicating, talking, has our view of a world or where we're in the world or where we are in our consciousness, and then they sustain a severe brain injury. Is there a consciousness that exists even while you're in a non-conscious state, such as anesthesia, or when you've received a severe brain injury? Is there a you beneath that persists, or is it altered and either temporarily or permanently?
The you is, as we said, the bundle of actions and reactions that you have created, that you have learned. The state of anesthesia is your ability to access that you, your ability to access that you. That you can be virtual in a sense, but it still exists as a bundle of actions and reactions and a history, let's call it. So you are the history of yourself, from starting like an atom and becoming a human being. There is a history that collects many, many things, many atoms, of course, many molecules, many cells, many actions, many reactions, many experiences, daily experiences that collect together to create the you. And now what you can do is actually interfere with the system that is allowing you to experience the you who you are, and therefore you will experience it differently. During sleep, you are not experiencing the fullness of you. During dream, you are experiencing fantasy style. During waking, even you're not experiencing the fullness of you, because the fullness of you is the ocean of consciousness. You are imagining and experiencing a few things. And sometimes, if you're a doctor, let's say, when you're a doctor, you're working as a doctor, you forget you're a parent. That's also part of you. You forgot you can drive a car. That's part of you. So your access to the different parts of you are changed based on situation and circumstances. And in anesthesia is the same. Your access to you is changed. And now, we can't say you don't exist or you're not there. I mean, at least your physiology is there, because, there are different stages of anesthesia. And when you are a great surgeon, so you know that when you cut somebody and if they are on a little lighter anesthesia, the body reacts. You get blood pressure rising and heart rate rising. And then you look at the anesthesia, the guy there says you have to increase the dose a little bit, what's going on here. So anyway, I usually take the example of a radio. A radio detects the waves, a radio like, we used to have, or your iPhone, you'd listen to the music. But let's take a big box radio, the old style radio with the knobs and all of that you adjust the frequency and you go here and there. The radio is not creating the music. The music is in the electromagnetic waves that are around you. But if you damage your radio, it will not sing for you anymore. It doesn't mean that because you damaged it, that means it is the one that was singing. It is the one that was singing, but it's not the one creating the original song. The song is in the air as electromagnetic wave, and there is a transducer, which we call the radio, which you can adjust as its frequency. And now you're listening to the frequency of this music, long, FM music, long wave music, whatever music, based on that. And if you play with it, you might disturb it, and that will not play the music anymore. So we require a system that allows us to experience higher or lower levels of consciousness and can go through different phases. And this doesn't say, at least based on this example, that it is the system creating consciousness. It's experiencing consciousness, living certain levels of consciousness, and it lives these levels differently at different times in different conditions.
I think I understand.
I know you understand. I hope our viewers are happy with it.
No, I think we've given them a broad discussion to get at least some insights into this. I always like what Carl Sagan said. He said, we're all stardust, and in some ways, we are all consciousness and are part of, at least for many of us, an extraordinary mystery that allows us, though, to be here, but also to accept that there's a lot more that binds us together, and ultimately, we are one.
Beautiful.
Well, so thank you for being with me today. It's been a joy and a delight. I look forward to our paths crossing in the future. Actually, Fred Travis and I and another colleague are actually doing an experiment or a project related to open monitoring, meditation, and TM. So I'm looking forward to that getting started. So thanks again, a pleasure, and I'm sure our listeners will enjoy this conversation.
Thanks to you. It's wonderful to be with you. It's great. Looking forward to being together live again.
Wonderful. Again, thank you for being with us today. The Into the Magic Shop podcast can be found where you find your most popular podcasts, or you can find us at intothemagicshop.com.